Every night, at exactly midnight, I'd hear the low hum again, the sound that made me question everything about my daughter's marriage. That mechanical drone seeping through the floorboards, constant and unnerving, like the house itself was crying. Before I tell you what I saw down there in that basement, like this video, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. I would love to say hello to you, because this one still shakes me to my core. You see, I thought I was moving into a sanctuary. After 37 years working as a librarian, after losing my husband to cancer, after months of rattling around that empty house where every creak reminded me of conversations we'd never have again, Clara's invitation felt like salvation itself. "Mom, come live with us," she'd said, her voice warm through the phone. "Daniel and I have this beautiful smart home outside Atlanta. There's a guest room with your name on it." My daughter Clara had always been my miracle. Born when I was 42, after doctors told me children weren't in my cards. She came into this world fierce and bright, with eyes that seemed to hold ancient wisdom even as a baby. As a child, she'd sit in my library after school, reading everything from poetry to physics, asking questions that made other adults uncomfortable. "Mom, why do people hurt each other when love feels so much better?" she'd ask at 7 years old, and I'd have to pause my cataloging because how do you explain human darkness to someone made of pure light? When she met Daniel in graduate school, I watched her eyes sparkle in ways I'd never seen before. He was studying computer engineering while she pursued social work. They seemed like perfect complements, her heart, his logic, her intuition, his innovation. At their wedding, watching them exchange vows under those twinkling lights, I whispered a prayer of gratitude. My girl had found her person. My work as a mother was complete. So when Clara called last November, voice thick with tears, saying she missed me, that she and Daniel wanted me close, I packed my life into boxes within a week. Driving up their long driveway for the first time, seeing that stunning modern house with its clean lines and massive windows, I felt something I hadn't experienced since my husband's funeral: hope. This house would heal my loneliness. Instead, it became the quietest battlefield I've ever known. The first month was everything I'd dreamed. Clara would make us tea every morning, Earl Grey with honey, just like when she was little. We'd sit on their deck watching the sunrise paint the Georgia sky in watercolors, talking about books, her clients at the social work center, my plans to volunteer at the local literacy program. Daniel would join us sometimes, always polite, always smiling, his tablet never far from his hands. "Mrs. Henderson," he'd say, never called me mom, even after 8 years of marriage, "I hope you're settling in well. If you need anything adjusted with the smart home system, just let me know." Their house was like something from the future. Lights that dimmed with voice commands, a thermostat that learned your preferences, security cameras disguised as decorative fixtures, motion sensors that could tell if you'd fallen. "It's for safety, Mom," Clara explained when I felt overwhelmed by all the technology. Daniel's company specializes in assisted living tech. He wants to make sure you're always comfortable and secure. I should have paid attention to that word, secure. In my naivety, I thought it meant protected. I didn't realize it could also mean imprisoned. The first sign something was wrong came during my second week there. Clara and I were looking through photo albums, remember those? Physical books with actual photographs you could touch. And I noticed her flinch when the smart frame on the mantel cycled to a picture of her and Daniel from their anniversary dinner. Just a tiny movement, but I'd been reading faces for 40 years in that library. Something about that image hurt her. "Beautiful picture, sweetheart," I said gently. "Yes," she replied, but her voice had gone flat. Mechanical. Like she was reading from a script she'd memorized but didn't believe. Daniel appeared in the doorway so silently I jumped. "Everything okay in here, ladies?" His smile was warm, but his eyes were scanning. The tablet in his hand showed what looked like a floor plan with moving dots. I see we're taking a trip down memory lane. Just showing Mom some old photos, Clara said, and I caught something I'd never heard in my daughter's voice before, appeasement. She was appeasing him. My fierce, independent daughter who'd once told off her high school principal for banning books was using the careful tone of someone walking on eggshells. Wonderful, Daniel said. Don't forget we have the Henderson family video call at 4. My parents are excited to see how Mrs. Henderson is settling in. After he left, Clara's hands trembled slightly as she closed the photo album. The way she smiled began to sound like a whisper asking for help, I wrote in my journal that night, though I didn't understand yet what I was seeing. The changes came gradually, like shadows growing longer at sunset. Daniel's politeness turned mechanical, his responses to Clara increasingly clipped. She started avoiding eye contact during our morning teas, staring instead at the smart home hub that blinked constantly in the corner. Sometimes I'd catch her rubbing her collarbone absently, and when I asked about the faint marks there, she'd laugh it off. Oh, you know me, Mom. Always bumping into things at work. These old buildings have the most inconvenient door frames. But I knew my daughter. Clara had been a dancer until she was 16, graceful as water. She didn't bump into things. The smart home sensors began beeping oddly at night. Lights would flicker at random intervals. The temperature would shift for no apparent reason. System updates, Daniel would explain when I mentioned it. The house is learning our patterns. It needs time to calibrate. But the strangest thing was the midnight hum. Every single night, at exactly 12 o'clock, a low mechanical sound would emanate from somewhere below my room. It wasn't quite machinery, wasn't quite electronics, something in between, constant and rhythmic like a digital heartbeat. Sometimes it lasted 20 minutes, sometimes an hour. Sometimes I'd hear muffled voices underneath it, though I could never make out words. I asked Clara about it during our third week together. Oh, that's just Daniel's workshop, she said quickly. He's been working on a prototype for his company. Some kind of server array that processes overnight data. You know how technical stuff is. She was folding laundry as she spoke, but her movements were sharp, almost violent. Like she was angry at the towels. I assumed she was right. I'm 68 years old, what do I know about modern technology? I'd only recently figured out how to use Netflix without calling my neighbor for help. If Daniel said it was a server, it was probably a server. Except servers don't make Clara's hands shake every time the clock struck midnight. I started paying closer attention. Every night, as the hum began, Clara would go rigid wherever she was in the house. If we were watching television, she'd grip the arm of her chair until her knuckles went white. If she was reading, the pages would tremble in her hands. If she was talking, she'd stop mid-sentence and listen with the intensity of prey sensing a predator. Clara, honey, I said one night as the familiar drone started up below us, are you feeling all right? You seem tense. I'm fine, Mom, she whispered, but her voice cracked on the word fine. Just tired. Work has been really stressful lately. The thing is, I knew stress. I'd watched my husband battle cancer for 2 years, seen him wake up in cold sweats from pain and fear. I'd held him through panic attacks when the treatments made him feel like his body was betraying him. What I saw in Clara's face wasn't stress from work. It was terror. By my 4th week in that house, I realized I was living with a stranger wearing my daughter's face. The Clara I knew, the woman who'd spent her 20s volunteering at homeless shelters, who'd chosen social work because she wanted to help people rebuild their lives, who'd called me every Sunday for 15 years just to check in, had been replaced by someone careful and quiet and afraid. She stopped making our morning tea. Started sleeping until noon on weekends. Stopped talking about her clients, her dreams, her future. When I asked questions, she'd deflect with questions about my doctor appointments, my book club plans, anything to shift focus away from herself. The bruises got worse. Not just on her collarbone anymore, I glimpsed marks on her wrists when she reached for dishes, shadows around her ribs when she bent to pick up laundry. Always with reasonable explanations. Always dismissed with that brittle laugh that sounded nothing like the music of my daughter's real joy. Meanwhile, Daniel became increasingly present and increasingly absent at the same time. He was always there, hovering at the edges of conversations, monitoring, managing. But when I tried to engage him directly, he'd respond with the programmed courtesy of customer service. "Mrs. Henderson, I hope you're enjoying your stay. Mrs. Henderson, please let me know if you need any adjustments to your room settings. Mrs. Henderson, Clara mentioned you had questions about our security system." Our security system. As if I were a temporary guest being managed rather than family being welcomed. I started noticing the cameras. Oh, they'd been there all along. Daniel had given me the full tour when I arrived. "Smart home monitoring," he'd explained. "For your safety, Mrs. Henderson. If you fall, if there's a break-in, if there's any emergency, the system will automatically contact authorities." But now I realized they were everywhere. In the living room disguised as decorative sculptures. In the kitchen hidden behind the smart displays. In the hallways built into the light fixtures. For your safety. But whose safety, exactly? The night everything changed was December 15th. I remember because it was exactly 6 weeks after I'd arrived, and I'd been lying in bed planning what to tell Clara the next morning about maybe finding my own apartment. Not because I didn't love being with her, but because something in that house was poisoning her, and maybe my presence was making it worse. At 11:47 p.m., a storm knocked out the power. The constant hum of electronics died, leaving behind a silence so profound my ears rang. For the first time since moving in, I could think clearly. It was like someone had turned off a frequency I hadn't realized was scrambling my brain. At exactly midnight, despite the power outage, the hum began again. But this time, it was accompanied by a faint glow seeping under my bedroom door. Not electric light, something softer, bluer. I lay there for maybe 10 minutes, listening to that mechanical drone, before I realized what I was hearing underneath it: voices. Specifically, Daniel's voice, measured and calm, and Clara's voice, small and broken. I slipped out of bed, my bare feet silent on the hardwood floors. The smart home sensors were down, the motion detectors dead, the cameras blank. For the first time in weeks, I was truly alone with my fears and my maternal instincts. The glow was coming from the basement door, which stood slightly ajar. As I crept closer, Daniel's voice became clearer. "Again, Clara. From the beginning. Tell me what you did wrong today." Clara's voice was so small I could barely hear it. "I interrupted you during the call with your parents. And I made coffee without asking if you wanted some first. And I forgot to charge your tablet before bed. Good. Now apologize." "I'm sorry, Daniel. I'm sorry for being inconsiderate. I'm sorry for being selfish. I'm sorry for forgetting my responsibilities as your wife." My heart stopped. I pressed my eye to the crack in the door and saw something that will haunt me until the day I die. The basement had been converted into what looked like a recording studio. Professional lighting, multiple cameras on tripods, a computer setup that would make NASA jealous. And there, in the center of it all, sat my daughter on a small wooden stool, wearing a plain white dress that made her look like a child. Her hands were folded in her lap, her head bowed, her shoulders curved inward as if she were trying to disappear. Daniel stood behind one of the cameras, wearing headphones, monitoring something on a laptop screen. The blue glow was coming from multiple monitors displaying what looked like a live stream interface, viewer counts, chat messages, donation alerts. He wasn't fixing machines. He was breaking her spirit, night after night, while strangers on the internet watched. "Let's try the gratitude exercise," Daniel said into a small microphone. "Tell our viewers what you're grateful for today." "I'm grateful that my husband is patient with my mistakes," Clara recited, her voice hollow. "I'm grateful that he takes time to help me become a better person. I'm grateful that he protects me from my own poor judgment." The chat messages were scrolling too fast for me to read most of them, but I caught fragments: "Make her cry," "Punishment time," "She needs more training." And donation alerts with messages like, "For more correction sessions," and, "Keep breaking her down." I realized I was looking at a live-streamed psychological torture session, performed nightly for an audience of perverts and sadists, with my daughter as the unwilling star. "Now," Daniel said, checking his watch, "let's talk about your conversation with your mother today. Did you follow the guidelines we discussed?" "Yes," Clara whispered. "I didn't mention our private sessions. I didn't ask for help. I redirected when she asked personal questions. And if she becomes suspicious? I'm supposed to tell you immediately so you can adjust the story." "Good girl. But I noticed some hesitation in your voice when she asked about the marks on your collarbone." "We've talked about this, Clara. Hesitation suggests deception, and deception suggests you're not fully committed to our arrangement." "Our arrangement?" Like her systematic destruction was a business contract they'd both signed. I wanted to scream. I wanted to kick down that door and tear him apart with my 68-year-old hands. But librarians learn patience, and mothers learn strategy. I forced myself to back away from the door, to climb the stairs silently, to sit on my bed and think. Daniel controlled everything in this house. The cameras, the microphones, the locks, the phones, probably the internet. If I confronted him directly, he'd deny everything, gaslight me, possibly escalate his abuse of Clara. If I tried to call the police from the house phone, he'd know immediately through his monitoring systems. But he'd made one crucial mistake: he thought I was just a harmless old woman who didn't understand technology. He didn't realize that librarians are research specialists, that we know how to find information and verify sources and build cases. He didn't know that before Clara was born, I'd spent 5 years volunteering at a domestic violence shelter, learning the patterns of control and manipulation. Most importantly, he didn't know that Clara and I had developed our own secret language when she was 12, after reading A Wrinkle in Time together. We'd created a simple code based on the first letters of seemingly random comments, so we could pass notes during boring family gatherings. If I was careful, if I was smart, I could reach my daughter without him knowing. The next morning, I made Clara tea for the first time in weeks. She looked surprised when I appeared in the kitchen at 7 a.m., already dressed and alert. "Morning, sweetheart," I said, setting her favorite mug in front of her. "I had trouble sleeping last night. Power outage had me all turned around." "Oh," she said carefully. "I slept right through it. Didn't even notice. Must be nice to be a sound sleeper." I sat down across from her with my own mug and a piece of paper. "I was thinking of writing a letter to your Aunt Susan. Haven't connected with her in months." Clara nodded absently, checking her phone for messages. I started writing, making sure she could see the paper. "Dear Susan, Clara and I are enjoying our time together. Really, every day brings new experiences. Help. Everyone should visit Atlanta soon. Care. Help." Clara's hand froze halfway to her mug. Her eyes flicked to mine, then back to the letter, reading the first letters of each sentence. Understanding dawned across her face like sunrise, followed immediately by terror. "Mom," she whispered. I kept writing, Maybe everyone thinks I'm adjusting well to the house. Please remember our vacation to the beach last summer. Me. Help. Daniel's footsteps on the stairs made Clara jump and grab the letter. Just helping Mom with some correspondence, she said as he entered the kitchen. You know how she likes to keep in touch with family. How thoughtful, Daniel said, but his eyes were sharp as he scanned the paper in Clara's hands. I held my breath, praying he wouldn't recognize our old childhood game. Well, I said, standing and stretching, I think I'll take a walk around the neighborhood. Get some fresh air, maybe meet some neighbors. Clara, would you like to join me? Actually, Daniel interjected smoothly, Clara has a full schedule today. Therapy appointments, grocery shopping, some household tasks we've been planning. Perhaps this evening? Of course, I said, keeping my voice light. I'll just explore on my own then. What I actually did was walk to the public library 3 miles away and use their computers to research everything I could find about digital abuse, livestream exploitation, and how to document evidence without alerting the perpetrator. I learned about organizations that specialized in cybercrime, about lawyers who understood technology-facilitated domestic violence, about shelters with experience in complex abuse cases. I also learned that what Daniel was doing to Clara, the nightly training sessions, the recorded humiliation, the monetized psychological torture, was part of a growing underground industry. There were entire networks of abusers who traded techniques, shared victims, and paid for access to live abuse streams. The chat messages I'd glimpsed weren't just perverted entertainment, they were likely connected to a sophisticated criminal operation. By the time I walked back to the house, I had a plan. That afternoon, while Daniel was in his office taking video calls, I used our letter code to tell Clara everything I'd seen and learned. Her breakdown was silent but complete, tears streaming down her face as she wrote her responses, hands shaking so badly I could barely read her words. It started 6 months ago, she wrote in our coded letter format. He said we needed extra income for the house payments. Just a few private videos, nothing identifying, completely anonymous. But then the audience wanted more interaction, more humiliation, longer sessions. Now it's every night and I can't make him stop. He has recordings of everything, Mom. If I try to leave, he'll release them publicly. He'll destroy my career, my reputation, everything. He monitors all my communications. He knows everywhere I go, everyone I talk to. The smart home system tracks my movements, records my conversations, even monitors my sleep patterns. If I deviate from his approved schedule or say anything suspicious, he adds extra sessions as punishment. I can't escape, Mom. But I'm so scared he'll hurt you if he realizes you know. Maybe you should go back to your old house. I couldn't live with myself if something happened to you because of my mess. My heart broke reading her words. My brilliant, compassionate daughter thought she was trapped because she was ashamed, because she felt responsible, because she'd been systematically convinced that her suffering was her fault. Classic abuse psychology, but knowing the patterns didn't make it any less devastating to witness. I wrote back, you are not responsible for his choices. You are not alone anymore. Trust me. That evening, while Daniel was in the shower, I made a call from my cell phone to a women's shelter in downtown Atlanta. I explained the situation to a counselor named Maria, who connected me with a specialist in technology-facilitated abuse. Within 2 hours, I had a safety plan, contact information for a cybersecurity investigator, and instructions for documenting evidence without triggering Daniel's monitoring systems. The key was to work within his surveillance system instead of trying to circumvent it. The investigator, a woman named Sarah who'd helped dozens of victims in similar situations, explained that Daniel's confidence in his technology would likely be his downfall. Men like him collected evidence of their own crimes, believing their control systems made them untouchable. He's live streaming the abuse, Sarah told me over the phone. That means he's creating digital evidence, storing it somewhere, probably backing it up to cloud servers. If we can access his network without him knowing, we can gather everything we need to prosecute him and help Clara. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. I would pretend to have a medical emergency, nothing life-threatening, but serious enough to require constant monitoring and care. This would give me a legitimate reason to stay in the house long-term while also providing cover for Sarah to enter as a home health aide, with specialized medical equipment that was actually sophisticated surveillance detection gear. Meanwhile, Clara would continue her normal routine to avoid raising suspicions, but we'd establish a coded communication system so she could signal if Daniel became violent or if the situation escalated beyond our control. 2 days later, I fell in the bathroom and complained of chest pains. Clara called 911, Daniel rushed home from work, and I was taken to the hospital for a full cardiac workup. The tests found nothing serious, stress-related irregularities that required monitoring but not emergency intervention. Perfect. Sarah arrived the next morning as my home health aide, complete with medical credentials, references, and equipment that beeped convincingly while secretly mapping Daniel's entire digital network. To him, she was just another woman he needed to manage and control. To us, she was our lifeline to freedom. Your husband has quite an impressive setup, Sarah told Clara and me while Daniel was at work, speaking quietly while her equipment hummed in the background. Professional-grade cameras, encrypted storage, secure transmission protocols. He's been doing this for a while and he's not stupid. But he made the classic narcissist mistake, he documented everything because he's proud of his work. She showed us printouts of file directories she'd accessed from Daniel's servers. Hundreds of video files organized by date, each labeled with degrading descriptions of Clara's sessions. Email correspondence with other abusers discussing techniques and pricing. Financial records showing thousands of dollars in monthly income from the live streams. But the most damning evidence was Daniel's personal journal, stored in an encrypted folder he thought was impenetrable. Detailed plans for escalating the abuse, strategies for isolating Clara from potential support systems, and worst of all, discussions about expanding the operation by recruiting other victims. He's been scouting women at Clara's workplace, Sarah told us grimly. Vulnerable clients, recent divorcees, women with financial problems. Your daughter wasn't his first victim, and she wasn't going to be his last. Clara's breakdown that day was the first real emotion I'd seen from her in months. Not the careful, controlled tears of someone afraid of punishment, but the raw grief of someone finally allowing herself to feel the full weight of what had been done to her. I kept telling myself it wasn't that bad, she sobbed in my arms while Sarah secured the room against electronic surveillance. He never hit me. He provided for me. He said he loved me and was helping me become better. I thought maybe I was overreacting, maybe I was being dramatic. Sweetheart, I whispered, stroking her hair like I used to when she was small and afraid of thunderstorms, psychological torture is still torture. Control disguised as love is still abuse. You survived something horrible, and now we're going to make sure it never happens again. We had a choice to make, continue gathering evidence for a more comprehensive case, or act immediately to get Clara to safety. Sarah recommended we move quickly. Men like Daniel escalate when they sense loss of control, she explained. Now that your mother is here with medical support, he might view Clara as more expendable. If he decides to cut his losses and disappear, she could be in serious physical danger. The final confrontation came sooner than we expected. On December 22nd, exactly 1 week after my fake medical episode, Daniel's behavior shifted ominously. He cancelled his holiday plans with his family, took unexpected time off work, and began spending hours in the basement during daylight hours instead of just at midnight. Sarah's monitoring equipment detected him researching bus schedules to Mexico and pricing for cryptocurrency wallets. He's preparing to run, Sarah told us during an emergency meeting in my bedroom while Daniel was supposedly at the grocery store. And I don't think he plans to take Clara with him. That night, we executed our plan. At 11:30 p.m., I took my prescribed heart medication and went to bed, making sure Daniel saw me settle in for the night. Sarah was officially off duty, but actually hidden in the garage with backup equipment and a direct line to local police. Clara followed her normal routine of preparing for the midnight session, but this time she carried a small recording device Sarah had given her. At exactly midnight, the familiar hum began from the basement. But this time, instead of an isolated victim performing for sadistic strangers, Clara descended those stairs carrying the hopes and strength of two women who loved her and a network of professionals trained to fight exactly this kind of evil. I listened from my bedroom as Daniel went through his usual routine. Good evening, viewers. Welcome back to our special training session. As you can see, Clara is ready to demonstrate the progress she's been making in learning proper submission and gratitude. The bile rose in my throat hearing him monetize my daughter's suffering, but I forced myself to stay calm and trust our plan. Tonight, Daniel continued, we're going to try something new. Clara has been resistant to some of our more advanced training techniques, so we're going to implement some stronger corrective measures. That was our signal. I pressed the button on the medical alert device Sarah had given me, sending a silent alarm to law enforcement with our address and the pre-arranged code for domestic violence in progress. In the basement, Clara was following her script. I understand, Daniel. I'm ready to learn. But first, I want to tell our viewers about something special that happened today. Oh. Daniel sounded pleased that she was taking initiative. What's that? I realized how much I love my mother, and how grateful I am that she's here to witness what you've been doing to me every night for the past 8 months. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Daniel's voice, cold and sharp, what did you just say? I said my mother knows about the cameras, the live streams, the money, the threats, everything. And she's not alone. I heard chairs scraping, Daniel shouting, Clara crying. But before he could hurt her, before he could delete evidence or run or escalate to physical violence, the lights throughout the house suddenly blazed on and authoritative voices filled the air. Police! This is a raid. Everyone put your hands where we can see them. The next few minutes were chaos. Officers securing the basement and the evidence. Paramedics checking Clara for injuries. FBI agents, apparently Sarah's backup included federal cybercrime specialists, cataloging Daniel's computer equipment and server arrays. Daniel's last words to Clara as they handcuffed him were typically manipulative, you'll never survive without me. You're too weak, too broken. No one will ever love you after they see what you've done. My daughter, my miraculous, resilient daughter, looked him straight in the eye and said, the only thing I'm broken from is you. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life healing from the damage you've done while you rot in prison. He used technology to control. We used truth to break the code. The legal proceedings took 8 months. Daniel was ultimately sentenced to 15 years for human trafficking, sexual exploitation, tax evasion, and a dozen other charges I can barely pronounce. The investigation uncovered a network of similar operations across 3 states, leading to 17 more arrests and the rescue of 11 other women. Clara's videos were removed from every platform they could find, though Sarah warned us that some might resurface on darker corners of the internet. The important thing, she told Clara, is that you're free now. What strangers might see in illegal recordings can't hurt you anymore, because the people who matter know the truth. The civil lawsuit against Daniel's company and the platforms that hosted his content resulted in a settlement large enough for Clara to never work again if she chose. Instead, she used the money to found a non-profit organization that provides technology security, legal support, and therapeutic services to survivors of digital abuse. We moved out of that house on New Year's Day. Clara couldn't bear to spend another night there, and honestly, neither could I. We found a small cottage in the countryside about an hour outside Atlanta, with a wraparound porch and windows that actually open and absolutely no smart home technology beyond a basic security system. I planted roses by the front steps, one for every night I stayed awake in fear, wondering how to save my daughter. 23 roses total. They're blooming now, 6 months later, pink and red and white against the weathered wood of our porch. Clara sits among them every morning with her tea, reading or writing or just breathing freely. She still has nightmares sometimes. Still flinches when electronic devices beep unexpectedly. Still struggles with trusting her own judgment after months of being told her thoughts and feelings were wrong. But she's healing, slowly and surely, with the help of trauma specialists who understand technology-facilitated abuse. More importantly, she's helping others heal too. The support group she founded meets twice a week in our living room, a circle of women who've survived everything from revenge porn to stalking apps to financial control through digital means. They share stories, strategies, and most importantly, hope. Peace doesn't come from silence, Clara told her group last week. It grows when we decide to speak. She's right. For too long, I stayed silent when I sensed something was wrong, telling myself it wasn't my place to interfere in my adult daughter's marriage. For too long, Clara stayed silent because shame and fear convinced her that her suffering was somehow her fault. But silence protects abusers, not victims. Silence allows evil to flourish in the shadows while good people convince themselves they're probably imagining things, probably overreacting, probably not seeing the full picture. When you see signs of control disguised as care, speak. When someone you love starts changing in ways that don't make sense, starts flinching at sounds that didn't used to bother them, starts making excuses for injuries or restrictions or isolation, speak. Love doesn't hide in cameras or rules. Love doesn't require constant surveillance or performance or proof. Love doesn't live stream humiliation for profit or threaten destruction for disobedience. Real love listens. Real love trusts. Real love fights like hell to protect the people it cherishes, even when fighting is scary, even when the enemy has all the technology and money and power. I'm asking you to do something for me now. Comment where you're watching from, but more importantly, comment if this story resonates with you, if you've seen warning signs in your own life or someone else's. Let's build a network of people willing to speak up, willing to ask hard questions, willing to believe victims even when their stories seem unbelievable. Share this story. You never know who needs courage tonight. You never know whose daughter or son or spouse or friend is trapped in a situation that looks normal from the outside but feels like prison from the inside. Subscribe for more true lessons from life's hidden corners, but more importantly, subscribe to the idea that we're all responsible for protecting each other. That silence in the face of evil is complicity. That love requires action, not just feeling. Daniel thought his network of cameras and servers and surveillance made him untouchable. He thought technology would always be stronger than truth, that fear would always be stronger than love. He was wrong. The network that saved my daughter wasn't built from fiber optic cables and encrypted servers. It was built from courage and compassion and the stubborn refusal to let evil win. It was built by women who'd survived similar trauma and dedicated their lives to helping others escape it. It was built by law enforcement officers who understood that domestic violence doesn't always leave visible bruises. It was built by a mother who refused to watch her child suffer in silence. Every night now, at exactly midnight, instead of that terrible mechanical hum, I hear something beautiful: silence. Real silence. The kind that comes when fear finally stops holding its breath and allows peace to settle into the spaces where terror used to live. Clara sleeps soundly now. No more trembling hands. No more careful words. No more performing gratitude for cruelties disguised as love. And every morning, when she sits among those roses with her tea, I watch her face and see something that was stolen from her slowly returning, the absolute certainty that she deserves safety, respect, and love without conditions. That's worth fighting for. That's worth speaking up for. That's worth breaking the silence for. The mechanical hum is gone forever. In its place, the sound of my daughter laughing with her support group, planning new programs to help other survivors, dreaming about a future free from fear. That's the only sound I want to hear at midnight ever again. Thank you for listening. Thank you for believing. Thank you for deciding that silence is no longer an option when it comes to protecting the people we love. Now speak. Comment. Share. Build networks of truth stronger than any surveillance system ever created. Because love, real love, doesn't hide in the shadows streaming for profit. It stands in the light, speaks the truth, and fights like hell to set the captives free.